Today is Wednesday, July 14th, and today I want to talk about the National Spelling Bee. Now, I've never been a speller. I'm okay, but every now and then I have to look a word up on Google when I want to use it. And I remember being in spelling bees in the class, in the fourth grade and in the fifth grade, and I don't ever remember coming close to winning. But this year, at the National Spelling Bee, we have a first-time event. A black young lady won the Scripps National Spelling Bee. Her name is Zelia Avant-Garde, a 14-year-old eighth grader from Harvey, Louisiana. And obviously, several leading blacks in this country have celebrated her winning, among them Barack Obama and LeBron James. Nowadays, black achievements, while begrudged by some, do take place in many major events. And certainly in the area of sports, the blacks have a large representation. And that's because they are fine athletes and they are people of intelligence, because the games they play require a lot more than just muscle. But let's go back and let's reflect upon the journey that Zelia's victory represents. Because in 1936, there was a young black woman whose name was Nolia Cox. And she had won the Akron District Spelling Bee in 1936. That's Akron, Ohio. And because she was a winner of the Akron Spelling Bee, she was allowed to compete in the National Spelling Bee. She was 13 years old, and she was the first black student that ever got that far. Listen to what happened to her on the way to Washington. She had to sit in the back of the train. She and her mother were not allowed to eat with the other spellers or their parents. They had to take the stairs instead of an elevator to the pre-contest banquet. So imagine a 13-year-old girl, smart enough to qualify for the National Spelling Bee, being treated like that, she and her mother. But that didn't dissuade her. That didn't get her down. She made it to the final five. This made the judges very nervous, so gave her the word nemesis. Now, Magnolia, who did not recognize it from the list of 100,000 words that she had studied, misspelled it. Now, there was a reporter in the audience who immediately protested to the judges, because Nemesis was the goddess of divine retribution and revenge, and was technically a proper noun and not an eligible word. But it was too late, and Magnolia was out. But she didn't cry. She took it stoically, and so did her mother. But her teacher and her chaperone, they cried for her. 8.5 decades later, we have a black winner, the first black American student to win the competition. In 1962, the NAACP complained to the National Spelling Bee that school officials in Lynchburg, Virginia, had told black students that they could not participate in the National Spelling Bee. But the National Spelling Bee didn't do anything about that, because as it turns out, you want to enter into the National Spelling Bee, you have to somehow or other start locally. And in Lynchburg, Virginia, they didn't want black students to start. So the spelling bee didn't exclude black students, but the localities did. Can you imagine that? You go to school, you go to your neighborhood school, you're a champion speller, and you can't get a shot at winning because of the color of your skin. Is that a shanda? And we haven't finished with this type of behavior in this country yet. It still exists. It's a shadow world. In the old days, too, if a black student and a white student were winners and they came from segregated schools, who do you think went to the National Spelling Bee? Not the black student. And you know why? Because it costs money to go to the spelling bee. And you need a sponsor. And most of the corporate sponsors were run by whites. So the blacks never got a chance to go to the spelling bee. Because there was no white sponsor that was going to step up to the plate and pay the fees. Now that's something I never understood and I never knew about. And while the schools themselves were desegregated, we know that neighborhood schools are often not desegregated. Not because they can't be desegregated, but because the people who live in that neighborhood are not of every color on the rainbow. They're a community of color, no whites. I can tell you I have many friends that went to school in the city of New York and there wasn't a black student in their classes. Not in their elementary classes, not in their junior high school, and in many cases not even in their high schools. And as I recall, when I went to City College, there weren't that many black students in those classes either. So the spelling bee, the National Spelling Bee, is a reflection of the United States. Now it's come to overcome part of it, but it hasn't overcome the part that involves education and spending money on education for the poor, the underprivileged. In order to get a good education in this country, you have to get it in the public school, and you have to get it in the right public school, because not every public school has the funding to give their student body the best education that's possible. It's something we really need to do, is figure out a way to create a universal cost for education that's fair to everybody. When you think about the cost of education and you live on Long Island, and you know in some of the localities the school taxes are very high, and in other localities the school taxes are low, because the people in those regions can't afford high school taxes. And if you don't have high school taxes, you probably don't get the best teachers, and you don't give your children in those areas a chance to get ahead in the world. And the ones that get ahead in the world that come from those environments are unusual in the fact that they have the tenacity to stick it out and figure out some way to get an education. So I think that the National Spelling Bee is a reflection of the universe of the United States anyhow. And it's a sorry thing that you have to say something like that, but it's true. So I will leave you with all these crazy thoughts. And I will see you in the morning. And have a great day. Bye.